Welcome back to the Base Talk podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Billingsley, owner and founder of Base Sports Performance in Hernando, Mississippi. In this episode, we talk about athlete nutrition with our performance specialist, Jerry Ewing. All right. Welcome back to the podcast. So as I mentioned today, we are with performance specialist, Jerry Ewing, talking about some nutrition. Jerry, welcome to the show, brother.
Oh, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So as we talked about, a lot of times we will get some questions from these athletes about nutrition and what they should be eating, before a game or before practice. What kind of snacks should we be eating during a game? What should we eat post-game to kind of help us fuel our recovery and performance and things like that. So I do have a couple, structured questions that we're going to go through here in just a little bit, but a lot of these athletes are kind of starting to make their way to you to kind of start asking those questions because they realize you're kind of the guy that, has the answers on a lot of this. So what are some of like the main big questions that you've been getting here recently in the last few months?
Yeah, so main questions are obviously like kids are drinking a lot of energy drinks nowadays. They're like, ooh, how much caffeine should I have before a game? Or when should I have my meal before the game? What should I be eating the morning of, leading up to, during game, post game, stuff like that. So a lot of questions just in general about overarching nutrition up and to, after, and around the game.
Let's start with like a pre-game or maybe even like a pre-practice. So, if we have an athlete that, knows they have a pretty big event coming up, what are some ideas of things that they should be eating to kind of help them get ready for that game or that practice?
Yeah, so pre-game or big practice or something like that really all starts about 24 hours prior to that event. So whether you're playing baseball, softball, football, all these different sports, volleyball, your nutrition leading up to, not just an hour before the game, is going to be huge. So starting about 24 hours. So let's say you have a game on a Tuesday at like 5 o'clock. We're going to start at 5 o'clock on Monday. So first thing is hydrating. That's the biggest thing. I've noticed a lot of kids in here, a lot of college, even some of the pros talking to me about is that, yeah, I've had Dr. Peppers, I've had energy drinks, and maybe I've had 8 ounces of water in the last 24 hours. So water is just so key to intaking and digesting all of the stuff that we eat. It's important for all of our bodily functions and as well as not being dehydrated during a game. So it really starts 24-hour buildup, making sure we're intaking about half our body weight in ounces. So you just cut your body weight in half and try to intake that amount of ounces of water in 24 hours leading up to the game. So that's where I would start. And then really, so 5 o'clock Monday, start with dinner. You want to have a good protein source and kind of leading up to that. A good protein source, when I talk about protein, is going to be red meats, chicken, turkey, fish, stuff like that. Stuff that has all the things that we need to help with recovery and muscle growth and stuff like that, so we can be ready for the game. So with dinner, you want to have about, so a lot of people don't have measurements, so you want to kind of take your hand and anything that's palm size, you probably want to go with when it comes to protein source. So if you look at your hand, just from like your wrist to where your knuckles start, that's going to be about 4 ounces. If you go from your wrist up to like middle of your fingers, that's about 6. And then from wrist to tip of your fingers is going to be about 8 ounces. So it's going to be different between male and female. So males, you're going to want to intake about 6 to 8 ounces. So like from wrist to middle of your fingers or wrist to tip of your fingers. And then females, you're going to be 4 to 6 ounces of a good protein source when it comes to that. And then also carb source is key because carbs are what your muscles and bodies use as fuel. So protein is the building block, carbs is the fuel source. So you're going to need a little bit of both leading up to the game.
So
sorry, go ahead.
No. So going back, just to recap that, and then I want you to elaborate more if you had more, was pretty much what we said was we want to make sure that we're hydrating, right? Getting those fluids in our body, getting our body ready to prepare. And then a protein source, depending on who you are, weight, things like that, anywhere from 4 to 8 ounces. And that's going to help us repair that muscle tissue as well as, hopefully help us kind of gain a little bit more muscle tissue during that time. And then the carbohydrate source, like you were mentioning, that I think you're about to elaborate on, was pretty much like the gasoline to the car, right? Like if we're going on a road trip, we've got to have gas in the car. So kind of the same type of thing for these carbs, right? Is the fuel. It is what your body runs off of. So
Exactly, yeah. So carbs is what our muscles need for energy. So protein's building block, carbs is the energy source. Types of carbs you should be eating: rice, it could be white or brown rice, depending on kind of any issues you might have. Brown rice if you're more dealing with, I know a lot of kids nowadays deal with kind of gluten sensitivities, stuff like that. And then also white potatoes and sweet potatoes. So white potatoes also get a bad rap, but that's because all the stuff we, cram on top of it. But white potatoes and sweet potatoes are both really good sources of good carbohydrates because they're high in fiber and all these other things. But yeah, so sweet potatoes, white potatoes, brown rice, white rice. You can get into some pasta, but I would kind of recommend staying away from that because it's not going to be as nutrient dense as like white potato, sweet potato, and rice. So those would be the carb sources, and you want to try to intake a cup to a cup and a half. Or if you're thinking about measuring it with your hand, you're going to take about a fistful. So if you were like to grab rice out of a container or potatoes, you would have come out with like a fistful of rice, potatoes, stuff like that. So that's what I'd recommend having with your lean protein source, as well as having some vegetables in there as well. So vegetables is where we're going to get our vitamins and minerals to help us process the carbs and proteins. That's why it's important that we have vegetables, is so we can have the things that we need to absorb all the nutrients that we can from the lean protein source that we're taking and the carbs.
what about what about something like a breakfast meal? Kind of going along these same lines. Maybe it's a pregame, maybe the day of, or something like that. What's a kind of an example of those three categories you just had as a breakfast meal, or maybe even a lunch?
Yeah, so you had your dinner. So now we're coming into the morning of the game. So the morning of, maybe some oats. So having like 2/3 a cup of oats, using some water or milk, depending on which one you like to use. And then if you do have time, because I know a lot of these kids and the parents don't have a lot of time to make a breakfast, oats would be my go-to, and maybe having like half a scoop or a whole scoop of protein powder mixed in, or maybe some Greek yogurt that's higher in protein to really start the day off right. So you want to try to intake about 15 to 30 grams of protein at breakfast. So that protein powder might help if you're in a bind, mixing it in with your oats or Greek yogurt. But if you do have time, trying to go towards having 2 to 3 whole eggs, because you're going to get some good protein as well as some healthy fats in the morning time. Try to stay away from like the heavier fat side of things. So try to not eat a lot of bacon or sausage, because those are going to be really high in fats. And you really want to focus on lean protein and carbohydrates is the main thing that athletes need. So if you have time, making 2 to 3 eggs with maybe some toast with honey on it, or a bagel with honey on it. And then if you're strapped for time, going for that Greek yogurt with oats, or even just having the honey and toast with Greek yogurt, something like that. And then also making sure you have some fruit, because fruit's going to be a really good source of vitamins and minerals as well, helping us absorb all the protein carbs we intake. So going with fruits like bananas, oranges, apples, blueberries is my favorite. I can go through some blueberries. I love just everything blueberries help you out with. So blueberries are my favorite, just because you can grab them on the go and just kind of pick at them all day.
I know two big things that I hear, and I'm sure you hear the same, is that breakfast, I didn't have time or I wasn't hungry, right? And I think you covered the time thing. Minute oats literally take 60 seconds, right? You throw a scoop or half a scoop of protein in, mix it in. We're a minute and a half in, and you've got a protein and a carb source, that can kind of suffice as a quick breakfast. What would you say to athletes or parents of athletes that have the "I'm not hungry" saying?
Yeah, so you're not hungry, but I mean, even though you might not be hungry now, you still need to take time to go ahead and intake the nutrients that you need, the fuel source that you need, because you might not have time to intake, and then you haven't ate from dinner all the way to maybe even lunch or maybe even your snack pre-game. So taking time in the morning to make sure that you're fueling yourself up, even though you're not hungry, is going to pay dividends when it comes game time and you're trying to slam a bag of Cheetos or something like that instead of having some nutrient dense food.
Awesome. So kind of moving later in the day here, let's just say that it's a game day, right? So we covered what to eat the night before. We covered kind of what to eat for breakfast and as lunch as well, and kind of the timelines. What about like right before the game or even like during the game? So let's just use baseball as an example. So maybe we have a shortstop or a pitcher. Is there something that you would suggest like right before the game to eat, or maybe like between innings as they get hungry, or even if they're not hungry?
Yeah. So if possible, you want to try to have something similar to what you have for dinner, maybe 1 to 3 hours prior to the game. Again, trying to keep the fat content low. So stay away from fried food, stay away from things that are highly processed, and try to stick with more of that lean protein, those good carb sources that we went over. And then maybe even throwing in some more fruits there, because those are going to be things that are going to digest slowly over time and be ready for you, ready for your body when it comes time during the game. So trying to start and take another meal 1 to 3 hours. But again, time is a big thing that we hear about. So let's say we're 1 hour prior to game, haven't had lunch. Really want to focus on fruits is a big thing. So try not to go to like high sugar foods. So try to stay away from candy, try to stay away from like highly processed chips and stuff like that, and really focus on getting those fruits in, as well as maybe even having a to-go protein shake or something like that, something that's going to help you, one, prep you for after the game, but also slowly digest. That way you have the energy to pull from during the game, because the candy you eat is going to digest within 20 minutes and you're not going to have it during the game. And your games, if we're talking about baseball, can go up to 2.5, 3 hours. You have a good game going. So really something that's going to slowly digest over time, and having a protein shake with some fruit, maybe even going back to the toast. So having some bread with some honey on it, that's going to be also a good source of carbohydrates to intake right before a game, because it's going to digest slowly throughout the game.
Love it. So two things I want to kind of recap there just in case. So my favorite go-to pregame, like you were mentioning pregame, maybe even like, in between innings, things like that, was definitely fruits and then like honey with toast. You mentioned the honey with toast. I love that. And I love the fruits because obviously, one, it tastes good, but I just loved the fruits overall. And like you said, it was kind of a slower digesting and kind of allowed that energy to be used later into the game. And you don't run out of energy by, fourth inning, third inning, and you're kind of running on E the last few innings, right? If we're eating, good quality carbohydrates like that, fruit, toast with honey, things like that, that allows you to sustain that energy a little bit longer. And that way we're not getting tired towards the end of the game. Second thing I want to hit, you mentioned kind of stay away from a ton of fat pregame, right? And one thing that I want to hit on the why is, fats are very satiating, right? Which means it makes you very full and potentially bloated or tired, right? So last thing you want to do before a competition is get, feel super full or super tired. Same thing with processed foods, things like that. So maybe a McDonald's or a Chick-fil-A might not be an amazing pregame meal. Obviously there's some things on those menus that you could select that would help, but fats, just like maybe a ton of peanut butter or a ton of nuts or things like that, might not be the best option pre-game, but again, earlier in the day or even like maybe after could help, kind of get some calories in and things like that. Would you agree with both of those?
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, definitely don't want anything that's going to sit heavy on the stomach. So staying away from those fried foods that's going to be higher in fat, because of the oils. So that's where the fat comes from, is the oils that people use to cook food. So I know that, again, we're strapped from time. So sometimes you're going from school to maybe right into getting ready for a game, because school like led up into the game. So if you do go to Chick-fil-A, staying more on the grilled side of things as opposed to getting the fried chicken sandwich or fried nuggets. So staying more on the grilled side of things, maybe getting a fruit cup, stuff like that. Getting the chocolate milk, like that's low fat content, so 1% chocolate milk, because I know that Chick-fil-A has that. Will also help with recovery, and it's a good carb source. So those are quick go-to things that you can get to. So just try to stay away from the fried foods. And even at gas stations, I know sometimes people opt to go to the gas station. They have fruit there. Like, I know y'all probably don't see it, and you probably don't want it, but they do have the fruit baskets there, usually right by the counter, that you skip past, and then you go to the sugar aisle to get you some gummies or M&Ms or something like that, or energy drink. That's really not gonna help you with recovery and in-game energy long term. So
Awesome.
yeah, try to stay away from those high fats, because it's really just you're not gonna be able to use that as an energy source, because fats take a while for your body to break down. Really, you want to stick to the carb sources and protein sources as opposed to something that might be higher fats.
Awesome. Love it. So we covered the night before pregame. We covered, pregame meals, breakfast the day of, maybe, even like a lunch or a meal a couple hours before the game. What are a couple nice and easy, like in between inning snacks?
Yeah, in between inning snacks. So y'all are going to be sweating a lot, especially as, we get closer to summertime, especially if you're in tournaments where you're playing maybe 2 games in a day. So intaking those fruits, I know I've said fruits a lot, but fruits has high antioxidants, which helps with recovery. It also helps with reducing inflammation. So fruits is just really good to go to kind of mid inning or in between innings, stuff like that, especially if you're, an inning's going long because you've already cooled down and stuff like that. So, and you need the energy to keep going. You really want to make sure that you're focusing on some fruits, maybe even having some granola on hand would help out as well. And then even having maybe even taking some bread or taking something like that. That's really, you can kind of go to that pre-game, mid-game if it's going a long game, or in between those double headers, is re-intaking that kind of honey with bread. Usually when it comes to bread, try to stay away from, this is also a caveat, try to stay away from the white bread and focus on whole grains, whole wheat stuff, because it's going to be better for you. But focusing on staying away from highly processed, so don't go get a corn dog and eat it in between innings, because again, that's going to be higher fat content, not really going to help you out at all. If you absolutely have to, trail mix is going to be really good to have, just because it's going to be higher in salt and you're probably going to be sweating a lot. Making sure you are drinking water in between innings, so don't just drink 5 Gatorades, because that's not really going to help you out, and it's going to be a lot of sugar, and also you might be overdoing the electrolytes if you're thinking about electrolytes. So you should probably intake 2 waters for every Gatorade that you drink, for example. So those are going to be some things to go to in between innings. And again, just focus on not trying to eat so much processed food, so much sugar, don't eat funnel cakes or anything like that in between innings, because it's going to sit heavy and you're going to be sluggish when you go back out.
Awesome. So let's kick to post-game meals, right? So the night of, or even like the following day, to kind of help us kickstart some recovery. What are some good options there? I'm sure some of them are similar, but what are some things that we could do, that these athletes could do to kickstart their recovery and kind of help recover quicker?
Yeah, so I actually was talking with one of our pros about this, because he liked to go to Dr. Pepper post game right into even having some more caffeine after that, right into kind of whatever is at the stadium, so concession stand food. I would recommend not doing that, because again, you want to kind of stick to the same thing. Consistency is key. That's one caveat as well. So we're talking about all this stuff. If we don't consistently do this every day over and over again, then going over these one-offs is not going to really help us. So we need to consistently do it every day. But going back to what you had the night before, you kind of want to have the similar thing. So ladies, you're going to want to intake the same thing, about 4 to 6 ounces of protein post game, as well as guys, you want to intake 6 to 8 ounces of lean protein source, And then the carb sources is the same. So rice, potatoes, stuff like that. Stay away from high fatty foods, again, because that's going to drive up inflammation. And especially if you have to play 2 days or maybe later in the day, then you don't want to increase inflammation because you already just had about essentially like a whole training session in the game. That's essentially what it breaks down to, is you're working out in the game. So, and you're trying to recover post game. So making sure you have that protein source, you have that good carb source, and again, trying to go to some veggies, however you like to fix them, steamed, roasted, however you like to fix them, whatever way is easiest for you to intake them, cooking them that way. Again, going for a cup of either rice, sweet potatoes, white potatoes, stuff like that. Staying away from, I know everybody likes to go to pasta and thinks about pasta, but really sticking to the rice and or potatoes is going to be the way to go. And then your vegetables. So really kind of the same thing that you have the night before game is the same thing you should be looking to have after the game.
Awesome. Love it. So right at the 20-minute mark, I have two questions that actually came from a couple of our high school athletes that have asked to us to cover this. So we did not go over this prior to this, so I'm going to go straight to it. One of the questions was, how many meals and or snacks should I have daily?
Yeah. So meals wise, I'd recommend for a young growing athlete is 3 meals a day. So 3 solid meals a day. Mini muffins in the morning does not count as a meal. I just want to add that out there because I've heard that a billion times. So mini muffins does not count as a meal. But yeah, 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks. Those snacks not being chips and gummies, Cheetos. The snacks being like, try to focus on finding something that has like 10 grams of protein or higher, and then fruit based or some healthy version of a snack, not going to a highly processed food snack. So yeah, 3 meals, 2 snacks at least a day.
Love it. Last one here. So one of the athletes said, I always find that I'm losing weight in season, but I eat just as much, if not more, than I was eating in the off seasons. What do I need to do to not lose weight in season?
Yeah, so not lose weight in season. You want to make sure that, so this is where it comes to being super kind of specific and staying consistent. So making sure protein stays high. So you, as an athlete, you should be intaking within about 10 grams of your body weight. So if you're 180 pounds, try to hit 170 grams of protein. So consistently doing that every day. And if you notice your weight still going down, bump the protein up, as well as bumping your carbs up. So bumping that rice, sweet potatoes, white potatoes, that kind of stuff, bumping it up because you are sweating a lot more. You are training a lot harder. Y'all are doing 2 to 3 practices a week, maybe 2 to 3 games a week. Also doing your training sessions here at base, also maybe at school. A lot of volumes going in. So making sure you're upping your food intake consistently, not just on a one-off day, consistently every day to make sure you can maintain weight.
Awesome. Love it. And one thing that I want to add is that just because you eat good, 4 or 5 days a week on weekdays does not mean you can take the weekend off, right? Your body has no idea if it's a weekday or a weekend, right? So the way that we eat during the week needs to be the same way that we eat on the weekends, right? We can't eat really good for 4 or 5 days in the midweek and then not eat anything over the weekends and wonder why we've lost weight on Monday. Or vice versa, eat a ton over the weekends, maybe too much, and wonder why we've gained a ton of weight, not good weight over the weekend. So just understand that the weekdays and the weekend days, nutrition wise and meals, need to stay the same and they need to stay consistent. Anything else that you want to add to that, or anything else that you want to leave with the listeners?
Yeah, so consistency is key. Like everything you do in the training room, all the things that we do when it comes to preparing for our sport, we do all these crazy things, but then we go home and we eat a bag of Cheetos. So really just focusing on staying consistent with nutrition, because that's the thing that's fueling our body. So if we're not adequately fueling ourselves consistently day in and day out and making that a focal point, then all the stuff we're doing for our performance and all the stuff we're doing for our skill work we're not getting the most out of it because we're not refueling our bodies, which is the thing that we're relying on to make us perform, to make us be better at our skills. So if you're not doing your nutrition, which is the foundation of everything we do, then you're really just not getting the most out of everything that you're doing and not going to see the best return on investment.
Absolutely. Love it. So, key takeaway here, nutrition is extremely important for performance and recovery. And if you want to get better as an athlete, you've got to have this stuff dialed in. Obviously, thanks for listening today. If you have any questions or follow-up questions that you want to ask us, ask Jerry, feel free to shoot us a message, shoot us a DM, or if you're one of our athletes, come in, ask us in person. Obviously, we're here to help. So if you found value from this podcast today, please feel free to share it. Rate us, review us, subscribe, all of the things. Thanks for listening today, Jerry. Thanks for coming on, brother.
Yeah, no problem.